This is Bruce Whitfield's Business Week #1 show of 2026. It's powered by Capitec, the business bank for everyone. It's business without the boring bits.
Capitec is an authorized FSP 4669.
On the podcast this week, South Africa's fastest growing coffee business booming in a crowded marketplace as global bean prices rise. If going to the movies is dying, why is the outdoor cinema business of Galileo thriving? And why taking risk is essential as we enter the uncertainty that is 2026. Let's give you the first Brutal Biz quiz question of the year. Warren Buffett retired at the end of 2025 at the tender age of 96. Means that he had 60 years at the helm of his investment firm, Berkshire Hathaway. What return did he deliver to investors over those 6 decades? What return over 6 decades did Warren Buffett give to investors? Now, I'm a nice guy, so I'm going to give you 3 options. A, 5,500%. That's pretty impressive. B, a little bit more outlandish. Was it 550,000%? Or C, perhaps most outrageous of all, 5.5 million%. Which one of those was it? 5,000, 550,000, or 5 million%? What was the return over 60 years from Warren Buffett? Who else can ask the question? Well, business editor Helena Wasserman at News 24 is with us, as she usually is. Now, Brutal Biz quiz question. I don't want to give the answer away here, Helena, but I'm curious as to whether or not you know the answer to the Brutal Biz quiz question this week, and that was the return Warren Buffett has delivered to investors over the last 60 years. Would you say it is, and this is a bit unkind, but hey, I'm in an unkind mood at the beginning of the year, 5,500%, 550,000%, or 5.5 million%? It sounds like Donald Trump maths, but it's real.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson with Warren Buffett. You always have to go for the highest number possible. So it's probably that million number. Sounds too outrageous to be true, but yeah, that's my guess.
It's a calculated guess. I'll reveal the answer later on, of course, and we'll see whether or not you should be the business editor at News 24 or not. Your career depends on this moment. Now, listen, we're going to talk to JP Fasad about this, but the JSE had an exceptional year, one of the top performing stock markets in the world in dollar terms. It's mostly gold. It's mostly platinum. Who knew that they were still such significant and important players in our economy? What's your assessment in terms of how things are going from a market's point of view? You've been involved in this space for decades.
I think you can't be a South African and not wonder how this will all go spectacularly wrong, So it's great. Bonds are at the best level in 7 years. The Rand's up 14%. Very interestingly, Bloomberg yesterday reported that one of the major international banks, a trader, they told them that, if you're looking for strong returns, go to the Rand. They are avoiding Latin America because of Venezuela. So, market sentiment's really very strong about South Africa. It's not difficult to understand why. You have a Trump guy probably going to head the Fed this year with rate cuts expected there. So investors aren't that enthusiastic about the dollar. You're not going to earn a lot of returns there. While in South Africa, we're sticking to that much lower 3% inflation target. We won't see as many interest rate cuts. We're looking comparatively responsible and good in a world gone mad.
Interesting view there, Lena. Can our mining good times last? We're not seeing massive new public capital investment announcements by our mining companies. Those may come because that's usually a sign of the beginning of the end of the good times, and we're not yet seeing that.
No, we're not, and it takes years to get a mine online. We had our first gold mine open last year for the first time in I don't know how long. So nothing major coming online. I think a lot will depend on the outcome of the Section 232 investigation in the US. they're currently looking at potentially slapping tariffs or trade restrictions on platinum. So there's a lot of stockpiling in platinum at the moment. And as soon as we have clarity on that, that could trigger some new direction in the white metal market specifically. But on the gold front, it's difficult. I'm not a gold believer, but the dollar isn't the safe haven it once was. We just saw that with the Venezuela events as well. And the central banks are still piling into gold. The People's Bank of China has been buying gold for 14 straight months. So, at this stage, it's very difficult to see a major correction in gold, but of course, anything can happen.
Another one that you've been concerned about, and for a long time, and News 24's business page has been full of it throughout 2025, was the ferrochrome mess. And our government is adept at trying to do a U-turn at 100 miles an hour when it's about to have a head-on collision 3 seconds from impact. And it's doing the same with ferrochrome. I wonder if it's going to succeed.
Just to recap, South Africa is the world's largest chrome ore producer, but China is absolutely eating our lunch. The power prices there are about half the price that Eskom is providing. And our local smelters are uncompetitive. 14 smelters representing about 350,000 jobs have been forced to close. So the few last remaining smelters are also sort of on the chopping blocks at the moment. So the next few weeks will be pivotal. And this week we saw the Minister of Trade and Industry announcing new regulations which will allow the smelters to collaborate, to work together on power contracts. But what they really want, of course, lower electricity prices. So NERSA will do public hearings in this month, I think, to consider whether they can cut tariffs to those smelters specifically. But a lot is at stake. I think 500,000 jobs, so those smelters are really critical. And it just boggles the mind that we can't make it work.
If we're going to focus on one thing this year, is it any one of these things? Is it local government elections? Is it the further loss of ANC influence? Is it, I don't want to call it geopolitics, maybe geopolitics? What's going to have the biggest influence, do you think, on the future this year? Any one of those things, all of those things, or something else?
It's definitely going to be global. What happens on the global markets, in the global economy, that's where my focus is at the moment. But of course, the ANC president, who's going to be the next president of South Africa, how the government structure will pan out. And I think what will be key for me as well this year is the second phase of Operation Vulindlela, where the government can actually sort out basic services and the municipalities. That's going to be key to South Africa's outlook.
Really, that's going to depend on voters, of course, as we go to local government elections. Do they want their local services fixed, or do they want them to continue deteriorating in the way they have for the past 30 years? Thank you, Eliana Basserman, the business editor at News 24. One of the things that stunned me in New York and other big European and US cities was the high density of coffee shops, big brands, independent coffee shops all over the place, dominated certainly in the US by Starbucks. And having read Howard Schultz, who was the guy who grew Starbucks into the global phenomenon, you get a very clear sense as to densification and why the strategies around coffee shops are the way they are. People are quite fickle. They won't cross a road, even if it's their favorite brew. So you've got to make it really easy and convenient for them. And South Africa doesn't have a huge high-income footfall traffic other than in shopping malls. And we've seen growth of many shopping and coffee brands within the mall culture of South Africa. We don't have that massive affluent pedestrian market, though, willing to shell out $50 on a cup of coffee. But what we have seen in the coffee culture of South Africa is huge growth in recent years. The best numbers I can find, Vida and Seattle each have got about 300 outlets. Mug and Bean, Woolies Cafe, they're not pure coffee offerings, but they're mostly restaurants, but they do put coffee at the center of what they do. They've got, a couple of hundred outlets. And the one that surprised me most, of course, in terms of its growth ambitions is Platō Coffee. Fairly new to the scene. It launched just before COVID, survived, and has recently gone on a really aggressive expansion drive and is incredibly visible, both Joburg, Cape Town. I've seen many, many Platō outlets. Founder Stefan Bradell is with us, and you start just before COVID, and you launched this first outlet, and it turns into a bit of a mixed blessing, I think, Stefan, because one, you're struck by COVID, but because of where you are and the location that you choose, as things open up a little bit during COVID, you find yourself in quite a gifted position for people like cyclists and others who want to go walkabout.
Yeah, it was like I always tell people, I couldn't choose better timing in a way. What happened there to us, because we had an informal trader's license, so we could open in level 4. So we were basically the only coffee shop open in Pretoria. And what happened there was the whole community thing and what coffee does, that almost became our DNA. And also our when we choose sites. So we don't go into big malls. We look at where do people live and do life together. And that's where we then say, listen, people are anyway in this area, let's just put a coffee shop there. And that's become our, call it DNA and strategy around the smaller towns.
But your choice of the first spot is fascinating to me, and I don't know why you put it there. I mean, Irene, lovely part of Midrand, that sort of area between Joburg and Pretoria, very, very nice, Centurion. But inside an old concentration camp, a South African war concentration camp, cemetery. I find that absolutely fascinating. But in that, bringing life back to spaces that are underutilized, perhaps, and unloved.
Yeah, so the story is we had a guest house just next to the cemetery, or the memorial garden. Let's call it the memorial garden. And what happened is when we stay over, so some nights we'll just go stay over for the fun, and then we had to go to South Downs to get proper coffee. And I knew it's an affluent area, Irene Security Village, with about 500 houses. And I just knew that if you park it there, you're going to get this. I was like cyclists, people with kids, people with dogs. If you can get those three, then you almost sorted. So, and then luckily it worked out. So yeah, it was an odd choice, but I think we couldn't pay high rent. It was like, it was the first like proof of concept. And if it didn't work, you could just pick up the container and move it to somewhere else.
Have you used containers subsequently, or have you gone more to bricks and mortar? Because the ones I've been into have been bricks and mortar venues, your Platō outlets. Have you used the containers elsewhere?
Yeah, we've got a new concept. Like it's a concrete pod, which is quite cool because you don't have to. There's no insulation, and so it's cool in the summer and hot in winter compared to a container. So we've got pods. Probably got about 20 pod locations. But what also is also nice is you can just put a rod through the thing and pick it up if the site doesn't work. So we've got probably 2 pod locations that's in the top 10 of our revenues. So it also works, yeah.
The background to this, I mean, you and your brother, you are in a proper job. You put your brother Petrus to run the first pod and to run the business. How long does it take, I mean, through COVID and after COVID, before you go, actually, this is a going concern. Both of us need to be here because we're going to ride this thing to 100 plus outlets, which is, I think, where you were in August, September last year.
Yeah, look, so we started end of 2019, and then let's call it the next 2 years. End of 2021, we were on about 10 shops that we debt financed, bootstrapped, ate with bricks and mortar for 2 years. And then I think what happened is people started to inquire about franchising. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I told Piet, listen, let's ring fence our corporate stores. And we started a new company, Platō Coffee franchise. And I said, listen, I'm going to jump. I'm going to run this thing, but it won't put pressure on Platō Coffee, our first baby. And the calculation was only to make up my salary. I had to do 1 shop per month. And that first year we did 10. So I came too short, but yeah, so that's at that point we were like, okay, I think we can make it work as a franchise, yeah.
And you grew rapidly during 2025, and as I see it, you're not intending slowing down this year.
Yeah, well, funny, we actually did exactly 52 shops last year, so 1 a week. Yeah, no, so there's a lot of shops in the pipeline for this year. I think we're almost going to double, so we're about on 130 stores. Yeah, and there's obviously the biggest one for us this year. We're opening our first shop in London, probably mid-March, which is a big one. Yeah, we started a construction there now this month, so a big one for us.
I'm interested in that one because I speak to Natasha Sideris and to the chief executive of Ocean Basket as well. And they've gone into the UK, and Grace Harding, and she's just, so gung-ho and so excited. And Grace has stalled at 2 shops, and Natasha can't see herself getting beyond 1. I get a coffee shop is different, but if you go to London, there are more coffee shops than there are dogs on leads almost. There's lots of optionality. There's been huge success in small franchises growing, very much like your story is in the London market. And I wonder why you've chosen London, which is a big Northern Hemisphere cities are massively competitive. I wish you luck with it, but why?
Yeah, I think for me, if you look at the landscape of London, there's 250 Starbucks just in Greater London. But the Starbucks and Costa, those guys, they're starting to struggle. They've almost missed the next generation, of matcha drinkers and really call it fifth wave specialty coffee, right? They've almost, I don't know if you know the Costa story, but they sold to Coke in 2018.
Costa sold them, yeah.
They sold for $4 billion. They're in the market now for 1.8.
Yeah.
So the big guys are bleeding in the way, and the independent, smaller guys are really taking market share. Like Blank Street is a good example in London. Started in the US, but they're doing very well. But I don't know. For me, the risk to reward is good enough. Like the risk is you lose 5 million rand on ShopFit. The reward is cool. You can make it, right? So I always tell people, the longer I do business and the longer I learn or meet new entrepreneurs, I think we're just dumb enough to think it's going to work, and then
no, but it's such an important characteristic, that being dumb enough and brave enough to try is at the core of it. Is this going to be a franchise store? Have you got a willing franchisee who's going to run it for you?
So the first store is going to be a joint venture between us and a local guy, also South African. He's been there for almost 20 years. So we're going to do the first store, call it a corporate store, and then see how it goes. But we want to, as far as possible, keep the stores corporate there. Because, in South Africa, it's very difficult. You get like a Mokopane and then get a Tsanin, and it's so far from each other. Where in London, you can do, 100 sites in a 10 kilometer radius. So there you could put up a nice, call it corporate structure. Where in South Africa, we're almost a decentralized corporate structure. We almost use our franchisees as the corporate structure in a way. So they will probably, because it's so dense, we're going to try and keep it at corporate as far as possible. Yeah.
Stefan, I'm going to watch your progress very closely, and I look forward to welcoming you onto the show again one of these days, when you can bring us up to speed in this year's growth. It's an astonishing story. Platō Coffee, Stefan Brunel and his brother Beatrice, or Piet, growing this business from nothing, from a container, and now going into the big leagues in a very competitive London coffee market. If you're old enough to have made phone calls on a rotary phone, those phones where you had to dial all the way around, like that, and you remember thinking, my goodness me, this is so cool, there's no longer a party line, you probably used to go to a drive-in, noisy places. There was always some idiot who would put on their headlights toward the end of the movie, and you wouldn't be able to see the picture anymore just as you came to the cliffhanging end of the movie. And it would ruin the entire experience. Well, the 21st century solution to al fresco movie watching is the Galileo open air cinema. If you haven't experienced it, there's still time, as summer is still very much in full force in Cape Town. Outdoor movies shown after sunset. Cape Town, of course, is the epicenter of this. And Ster-Kinekor and New Metro must be looking at the success of these outdoor movies and wondering where they went wrong. We've got the open-air cinema owner of Galileo, Matthew Schultz, with us. Matthew is the managing director of Galileo Open-Air Cinemas. And I wonder, Matthew, if you've hit on a recipe of showing old movies we've all seen before, but it's just about experience rather than actually the content or the movie itself.
Yes, I think you nailed it there. Something that sets the Galileo apart and sort of open-air cinemas like us is exactly that. I think the experience is the main draw. So going to a cinema indoors, you obviously mentioned the two stalwarts, New Metro and Ster-Kinekor there. And obviously that's a fantastic viewing and listening experience, and you are watching the latest movies come out. But our angle is slightly different, where we have a picnic setting that lasts throughout the Cape Town summer season. So our shows start sort of mid-October and run for 7 months until mid-May when the weather's nice. And the experience and the fact that you're outside or you're visiting new locations, you're watching older nostalgic movies that you haven't potentially seen in a while, that all combined into this wonderful day and evening that you can't really replicate anywhere else. So I think really the experience is what sets us apart, as you've said.
Not about the movies. I mean, if I wanted to watch Dirty Dancing again, I could find a streaming service somewhere in the world at a fraction of the price, invite the 20 people I want to have a picnic with to come and sit in my lounge on a big screen TV, and we can watch the film. We're not going for the movie. The movie is incidental almost to the experience.
Yeah, in a sense, I agree. Like often what we see when we're doing our planning and we're choosing our movies and we getting feedback from our community is we try and do a lot of surveys and we speak to people that come to the show and say, guys, what do you want to see more of? Because obviously myself and the team have to choose all the movies up front because our tickets go on sale on web tickets and they last throughout the entire season. So from beginning of September, you're able to buy tickets up until the end of May. So we really sort of put a lot of thought and effort into choosing the movie schedule. But as you say, sometimes it's about the venue, it's about the time of the year, it's about which day of the week it is. And, it's a lot of trial and error depending on which type of movie we choose. But, when you come to a Galileo show, there's a few things that you can expect, which is sitting outside in a wonderful natural location. There's going to be vendors and food stores on site. There's going to be a big movie screen playing some movie that either you've seen or you haven't seen for 10, 20 years, or you haven't seen at all and you're going to experience it for the first time. The indoor cinemas, the big driving force is what movie is launching or releasing or which actor do I want to see. So we're tapping much more into the sort of nostalgic community, casual event, picnic, family-friendly vibe, I think.
You talk to most people, they say, well, we can't go to movies anymore. Tickets cost more than $200 unless you're part of some incomprehensible rewards program where if you stand on your left foot and you input your details with your right hand and the third finger on your right hand, you get a special price on a movie ticket. You're paying $200, $220 for a single movie ticket, and that's expensive. And then, of course, if you want some popcorn and cold drinks, people complain about that as well. Your ticket costs are about, $150? They're not vastly different, which makes me think that the business model of the cinema is one that is stuck in a 1920s thinking.
Yes, and that's the funny thing. I mean, we're the ones showing the old nostalgic movies, but
Exactly.
We seem to be adapting with the times a bit better, hopefully. I mean, not to let them down at all. Obviously, they're running a very big business, much larger than ours. So we just try and sort of listen to the community. And I think the fact that we're a small business actually helps us a lot. Our pricing is super important to us because we do set ourselves up as a family-friendly event. And we know that obviously the cost of living is increasing, salaries are stagnating. So we really do try and make an effort to make our shows more affordable. And as you've said there, our cheapest ticket this season is $155, and that gets you into this picnic event. You watch a movie and you can bring your own food is another great way that we try and cut costs for families. So at most of our venues, it being a picnic event, you can bring your own popcorn, your sweets, your dinner, your drinks, water, juice, food for the kids, whatever it might be. And that obviously is a big saving, whereas some of the more traditional cinemas, obviously you're forced to buy from their concession stand, which now makes a movie night a 200 Rand ticket, a 200 Rand popcorn and drink and sweet combo. And all of a sudden it's sort of pricing out a lot of families.
I mean, you've got the advantage of some beautiful natural spaces within Cape Town from a security perspective, and that's why the drive-in concept simply couldn't work anymore, because you can't secure a space that big to give people the comfort that they're not going to get their car stolen while they're sitting inside it. So you sit at the waterfront, or you've got Kirstenbosch and other venues, got wine farms that will be open to allowing you to use their spaces, and those are contained spaces. Is that what restricts you, therefore, to Cape Town? And maybe that's the restriction on the business model that means you can't really take it anywhere else.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something I've been thinking about for the last few seasons, to be honest. Obviously, we have a massive Cape Town following, and we are the biggest outdoor cinema event in South Africa due to the fact that we are so popular and well supported in Cape Town, which we're obviously very grateful for. The huge advantage that we have in Cape Town, obviously being locals, I'm Cape Townian, so is my team. We know the area. We've been with many of these venues for such a long time that it's such a good win-win for the venues as well, because when they might have a wine tasting for 100 people on a Saturday, now they can expect a few hundred people to come to their venue, experience it, sit on the lawn, partake in their food and beverage, and just have like this great experience as well. The Cape Town summer is also a huge advantage, where we have sort of 6-7 months of sunshine, some odd days of rain. As we know, the Cape Town weather is highly unpredictable. But because we have such a long summer period, it really makes sense to be stationed here. But to answer your question, Bruce, I have been thinking about expanding throughout the rest of South Africa. We get tons of inquiries from Durban and Gauteng and saying, guys, when is the Galileo coming up here? We really would love to have the same experience. So it is something I've been looking at doing, potentially for next season. But yeah, that, as you say, there's the security element, there's the weather element. So there's a few different factors we need to sort of just get on top of before we move up. Because one of the things I think that makes the Galileo really special, for anyone that's been, they'll probably say the same, is the crew and the experience you get when you arrive. So there's sort of this really like welcoming experience, and I wouldn't want to bring the Galileo to the rest of South Africa without the experience being 100% correct. So it's an idea. It's something hopefully we'll make happen soon, but yes, not yet.
All about the experience, the co-owner and the managing director at Galileo Open Air Cinema, for now only in Cape Town, the Western Cape, but with plans to consider new markets. If you've got some ideas for Matthew Schultz, get in touch. Bruce Whitfield's Business Week, the podcast that respects your time and your intelligence. The Brutal Biz Quiz question this week, I asked you in the first Brutal Biz Quiz of the year. Warren Buffett retiring at the end of 2025 at the age of 96. He had 60 years of investing track record at Berkshire Hathaway. What return did he deliver to investors across 6 decades? Was it 5,500%, 550,000%, or 5.5 million%? Well, the answer, it's hard to compute, but $100 invested in Berkshire Hathaway at inception is worth $55 million today. $55 million out of 100. That is the impact of 5.5 million percentage points in growth. If you compare the performance of Berkshire Hathaway to the S&P 500, that's America's 500 biggest companies. Now, that index did well. It grew very, very nicely. It grew by 39,000%. Very impressive. And if you'd invested all the dividends or reinvested all the dividends, that $100 would have grown to $400,000. You would have made a decent enough return. You'd be very pleased with your $400,000 out of $100. But giving it to Buffett 60 years ago, if you'd had the good sense, the judgment, and the foresight to leave it with him, you'd have 55 million. And that's the difference of compounding your growth at 10% a year versus Buffett's nearly 20% a year. Every percentage point matters, and every year matters when it comes to investing in stock markets. Warren Buffett's key philosophy: never bet against America. So much so that he has explicitly advised that most of his heirs should invest 90% of whatever he leaves them in the S&P 500, in a low-cost index fund reflecting the S&P 500, and 10% in short-term government bonds. His reasoning: most people, even his own family members, will be far better off with a simple, diversified approach like the S&P 500 rather than try to beat the market, something he did with astonishing success over 60 years.
Why pay more to receive international payments? With Capitec, it's 50 Rand every time. And when you send, it's only 175 Rand. So you keep more Rands in your account with clear fees and no surprises. Do it on our app. It's easy, fast, and safe. From making payments to getting money, international payments are simple with us. Bank on better international payments with Capitec. Capitec is an authorized FSP 46669. Conditions apply.
Let's look at markets now, and Jean-Pierre Verster is with us. He is the founder of Protea Capital Management. And I looked at some data on markets last year, Jean-Pierre, and I was stunned at the dollar returns of the JSE versus the London Stock Exchange versus the Japanese Stock Exchange versus the New York Stock Exchange. I think the only two markets of like fairly serious markets that did better than South Africa's 40+% return in dollar terms were places like Pakistan and South Korea. Now, South Korea's got Samsung and other great industries, but the JSE truly did shoot the lights out.
Yes, Bruce, it certainly did. But it's important to look underneath the hood and understand why. The returns were actually quite concentrated, and most of the return came from the gold and platinum sector. So because the gold price went haywire, and then in the last few months of 2025, the platinum price followed, our gold miners and platinum miners did particularly well. Some of the gold miners were up more than 200%, and the platinum miners roughly 100%. And that then pulled the whole JSE up to be up over 40%, as you say. And the MSCI South Africa, which just has different weightings, was actually up over 70%. So depending on the weight of the gold and platinum shares, it was an outstanding return. SA Inc., not so much. Banks did quite well, retailers not so much. But yes, the gold and platinum mines saved our index last year.
Which then suggests that a repeat is unlikely in terms of, and a repeat of the same sort of quantum is unlikely. But again, considering the way that the year has started, Donald Trump has ensured it starts with a bang, literally. That continued global uncertainty likely to continue driving the same sorts of demand, perhaps, for commodities that 2025 brought.
Yes, I like that you use the words like and perhaps and unlikely, because we need to talk in probabilistic terms, especially when it comes to commodities, because if you look historically at what the gold price has done, it does have a tendency to rise very sharply, but then also to fall very sharply. And while geopolitical risks are currently quite elevated, if you look at Venezuela and what the US is doing in the Western Hemisphere, it doesn't mean necessarily that the gold price will continue to be at this level or continue to go up. There is a scenario in which the gold price can go down quite sharply. So I would just be careful. Commodity investing is not like traditional qualitative investing where you buy into a high quality company and you almost forget about it. When it comes to these commodity companies, and gold and platinum in particular, they are cyclical. You need to be aware of that to invest in them.
I haven't given the answer to the Brutal Biz quiz question yet, but Warren Buffett famously said, never bet against America. And, one looks at the behavior of the American administration at the moment, and it's very tempting to bet against America. My logical brain says it's too soon to call on that particular one. Is it time to be, South Africa's done it very well, and naturally that's going to draw flows into South Africa. Is it time for South Africans to, once again, with a stronger rand environment, look elsewhere, perhaps back to the United States and S&P 500, which did grow 17% in dollar terms last year?
So the rand is the important factor here. With the rand having strengthened so much to the mid-16s, I do think it's an opportune time for South African investors to consider taking some money offshore. Where you take it to is important, but I think the opportunity is to take it somewhere. So even the US, when we say don't bet against it, but you might be nervous about what Trump is doing, there will always be winners and losers. And, the latest is the defense stocks. He wants to increase the defense budget to $1.5 trillion. So there's going to be some opportunity. Some of the semiconductor stocks like NVIDIA still have got monopolies. They could be winners. So there'll definitely be some winners abroad, in the US, even in Europe. Asian markets also have some interesting opportunities if you look at Japan. But with the rand at these strong levels, Bruce, I do think it's a good time for South African investors to diversify globally.
Now, again, it's not a bet against South Africa. It's about where your money will do best for you and for your investments, and how to think about that. Talk to me about Sasol, because, again, I'm highly skeptical about Donald Trump's rhetoric around what this is going to mean in terms of what his attack on Venezuela and the abduction of the president is going to mean for the oil markets and U.S. Energy producers exploiting the opportunity brought by Venezuela, which has got an outdated and antiquated system through a lack of investment, with oil prices at $60 a barrel. How does Sasol feed into this sort of global environment?
So I would say not too well. Sasol would be very dependent, their performance would be very dependent on the dollar oil price and the rand dollar exchange rate. And both of those have been going the wrong way for Sasol recently. If you look at the opportunity in Venezuela, they have got heavy oil. That oil might be transported, the crude oil, to the US for further processing, for refining. But that's not what Sasol has in Louisiana. Sasol's input there is gas, not petroleum. And because of that, it means they won't benefit from what's happening in Venezuela. It's more the big chevrons of the world that will benefit. So Sasol's in a tricky position with oil being under pressure. If the US actually gets Venezuela to pump more oil, that might go to the US rather than other places, but that could put pressure on world oil markets. And then the fact that they have this big Louisiana complex that actually makes plastics from gas, that will also not benefit from a lower oil price. So things aren't looking great for Sasol. A strong rand isn't good for Sasol. It has been very cheap, so a lot of investors in South Africa like it just because it's cheap, but it's perennially cheap. And there is such a thing as a value trap. So I'm still cautious about Sasol. I have been for the last 3 years. And nothing has changed my mind to become bullish on Sasol.
Yeah, it just always seems to be in the wrong part of the cycle, unfortunately. I can't think of anybody better to explain a bit of a shambles happening between Mustek and Novus. Novus wants to buy out Mustek, but there's been some kind of complexity there, say, for Nyekere, in this process. Please explain the Novus-Mustek tie-up or attempted tie-up.
Sure. So Novus is a listed company, and it was itself taken control of by A2 Partners. And the people behind A2 Partners then attempted to use Novus to acquire Mustek. And they went through the threshold of 35%, at which point they need to make an offer to minorities. And they made that offer to minorities at 13 Rand, which was apparently the highest price they had paid to build their stake up to just over 35% in Mustek. A complaint was laid at the TRP, an investigation was launched, and what the TRP found is that there was an undisclosed related party, concert party, that was also buying shares together with Novus. And this concert party was actually operating from the exact same address. It's the exact same suite, business suite. So it's literally like two desks next to each other in Sea Point. And this undisclosed party actually bought some shares much higher, at about 15 Rand. And that means that the TRP then found that the offer that Novus must make to all the Mustek minorities is not 13 Rand, but the higher price of, I think it's 15 Rand 41. And that means that it's going to cost Novus almost 100 million Rand more to purchase the rest of Mustek from minorities. And there were some damning findings against some individuals as well. The TRP effectively said that the sole director of Numis, which was the undisclosed concert party, was lying and was trying to mislead the TRP. And I mean, that's criminal offense. So it's going to be very interesting to see what further steps will be taken, because some reputations are definitely being sullied in this whole affair.
The TRP, the Takeover Regulation Panel, if you're wondering. But yes, thank you for that one. And it's a really fascinating story. Any bets on what's going to happen to the currency, the markets this year? I know you're not a betting man. You're a carefully considered calculator of probability. But where did your carefully calculated sense of probability put us 12 months from now?
Bruce, I know that I don't know. So people will make all kinds of forecasts about what's going to happen the next year. I think certain businesses might do quite well. What people's reactions to those businesses doing well might be in terms of what stock markets would do, that is unknown, because human nature is so fickle. So I have no idea what stock markets or currency markets will do. What I would say is that the JSE offers a lot of opportunity if you look at valuations when it comes to SA Inc. shares, financials, retailers, industrials. And the mining sector now looks a bit expensive, especially the gold and platinum shares that did so well in 2025. So rather let valuation be your guide versus having a crystal ball, which no one really has, which is not cloudy.
JP Pistad. He is the founder at Protea Capital Management. The one thing you don't want to do is face your own mortality. The one thing that you must do is deliver a will. What is a will? Warren Ingram, certified financial planner.
A will is a kind of a strict legal document that dictates what happens to your assets on your death. It will cover a bit more than that. If you're a parent, for example, it will also dictate what should happen to your children. Who should they be looked after by on your death? And then it will get into some fairly mundane but important details like should you be buried or should you be cremated? Around the world, wills are tightly regulated in terms of what constitutes a valid will. And don't think that if you've watched enough movies about lawyers or by lawyers that you know what a will is. Wills in every country are very strictly regulated. There's an enormous amount of case law that will dictate when a will is valid, when it isn't, and the like.
Being absolutely clear in terms of what your wishes are as to how your assets should be cared for once you are no longer there to care for them in a way that is for the benefit of your beneficiaries.
Wherever you are in the world, if you die without a valid will, you're leaving responsibility for your children or your beneficiaries of your will. You're leaving a responsibility to some sort of functionary, whether it's a government official or somebody out there who may not know you at all, doesn't really care. It's now just their job to take your life's assets and then distribute them in the fairest way they know how. And it might be completely contrary to what you would have wanted, what your intent was.
And it takes a long time to do, Warren, and that's the problem. I mean, just tidying up even the most organized estate takes years.
And classic situation with two life partners, one dies and the other one becomes destitute because they're stuck in a situation where there is money available, but it's stuck in an estate that isn't being wound up. And, they're forced out of the home that they were living in because actually that was in their partner's name. All of those things can and do happen all the time because people wanted to save a bit of money on not paying for a proper will, or they were simply too lazy to get it done.
Or too fearful, frankly, to get it done, would want to face their own mortality. It's the most selfish act any human being can have. What do you say to people who say, well, I don't have very much, a couple of hundred or whatever the case is, maybe a few thousand, maybe a couple of 100,000, depending on the currency regime you're in. They can sort it out amongst themselves. It's grossly irresponsible.
If you are considered an adult in your country, that means you need a will. Doesn't matter if you have no assets and you only have debts. You might have some possessions that are completely worthless to anybody else, but might be incredibly valuable to someone you love who would really appreciate them on your death.
Talk to me about what we need to do now. If you have a will, review it. Know where it is. Tell your beneficiaries where the will is. Have it in place. You don't have to tell them what's in it. Discuss it. Say, oh, you would like the Rembrandt. All right, well, then you have the Picasso. Whatever it might be, depending on your assets. Have the discussion. Be open about it. You've got nothing to lose.
And I think that's exactly right. Make sure you've got a will. Make sure it's valid. If you last had a will done 10 years ago and you've now got married and you have children, probably time to change your will. So make sure that the will is still appropriate for your life as it is today.
And if you got divorced and you don't want to leave them anything, make sure that you've updated it on that perspective as well. Thank you, Warren Ingram, certified financial planner. Let's wrap it all up with your thought for the week and kick it off with one from the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. And Bezos once said, if you decide that you're only going to do things you know are going to work, you're going to leave a lot of opportunity on the table. And I love this. Do you find yourself increasingly unwilling to fail, to seek certainty before you try something? You are going to experiment less if that's your approach. You're going to try fewer things. And one thing that the world's most successful people do is they don't throw caution to the wind. They don't say yes to every crackpot scheme that lands in their inbox, but they do take calculated risks. They do dare occasionally to step into the unknown. Stepping into the unknown is different from stepping into the void. But a life without risk is a bit like, I don't know, it's going to get me into trouble, but let's say it anyway. A life without risk is a bit like opting for a civil service job that's got a big, powerful trade union behind it. It's a nimble thing to go and work in the civil service, don't get me wrong. But you're not likely to have an inspired life. Anyway, all hate mail sent to Artran@News24. Thank you for listening to this first edition of Bruce Whitfield's Business Week on News 24. It's powered by Capitec, the business bank for everyone. For now, bye-bye.
Capitec is an authorized FSP 4669.